Hey, what's up? Today I'm dressed as a depressed librarian, mainly because I always am, but also because today we're talking about books. And by we, I mean myself, you can't talk, you're a camera, and by books, I mean book, singular. I don't even, read books that much. I'm a fraud! Okay, so for context, as I said before, I don't read much. In fact, I don't know if I can read, besides the point. I didn't know this book existed because I don't go out and search for books, but I of course found it when I was researching a completely different Onision video ages ago, like more than a few months ago, so like 2 uploads. I was of course very much intrigued by his collection of books. Yes, collection is written more than one, because unlike other books by creators, it's not actually from his point of view. It's not like this meta commentary talking about being a YouTuber or being a creator or being Shane Dawson. It's not what it's about. It's actually a fictional work about a fictional character that isn't Greg. Kind of it. I'll get to that. This video has been in the works for quite a while now, a few months at least. It's being worked on in parallel to other videos at the same time. But I thought if I was going to do this, I should do it right, and I should do it respectfully. I'm kidding, of course. I don't have any intention of doing that. It just took me a really long time to scrounge up the willpower to tackle this like 250 page, maybe 300 page behemoth. There's no page numbers. I don't know how big it is and I don't want to count it. Greg, for whatever reason, whatever his justification is, actually genuinely seems to care about creating good literature, like interesting, respectable literature, seeing as he's had multiple attempts over the years, the most recent one being in 2018.
Oh my god, it's perfect.
I have one from 2015. Not that you would know that, because the book is so bare bones, it doesn't even have like a publishing date or any information on it. It's just the book. I'm genuinely surprised it actually came with all the chapters. Oh, joyous days. Now, I bought my version of the book secondhand, partly because I didn't want to give Greg any more money, but also because I believe that the people who bought this do deserve some kind of consolidation, some kind of reparation for the emotional damages that were caused by this, which is an elaborate way of saying that I am writing this purchase off as a donation on my taxes. Ooh, what's the taxation office gonna do? Put me in jail? Oh yeah, I'm actually I could go to jail. I would die in there. You see, there's a beautiful story for this specific copy of this book. It's called, This Is Why I Hate You. The story behind it is quite fascinating. There wasn't a note with the book. I just received the book itself, but you can tell by the wear and tear of the pages that they got about maybe 7 pages in and then just didn't read it. So, maybe they made the first mistake, but they didn't make the second. After reading this, I actually feel quite disappointed because despite this being in comparison to most books that just exist, it's very terrible. But in comparison to the rest of Onision's catalog, it's actually pretty decent. I mean, one of his books is about some kid that gets amazing extraterrestrial powers and then kills God, but God's actually 3 different beings, but he kills them all in the worst fight scene ever. This one is just about some kid with daddy issues that goes into the military. I just kind of gave away how similar this is to Greg. Whoops. I'd like to take a moment to read something out that highlights the tone of this book, which is the About the Author section, and it just reads, "It doesn't matter," which is very pretentious, very edgy, and incredibly sad, but not sad in the narrative sense, my favorite character died. I'm going to die kind of sad. More like, oh, the person writing this is really sad. Man, they need to change something. Fun fact, this video is now my longest in terms of creation time. It's taken a short minute. Whether it was worth it, that's up to you, just kidding, it's up to me. I've had this book for a really long time now, but reading it is like wading through waist-deep mud, but also, it's just really shallow. It's easy to critique, but it's just too easy to critique. Any singular one that I could bring up, it's completely pointless to talk about because it's been completely oversaturated with other terrible problems with this book. On to the beginning, which starts off very simply, very simply. My name is Arthur Gale. I'm a 17-year-old in high school, which somehow, despite being the very first sentence, is objectively untrue because this book is not written by or like a 17-year-old fictional high school kid. It's written by a 30 to 40-something-year-old real person named Greg, who's just using this kid as like a mouthpiece for his worldviews and opinions. The vitriol that Arthur speaks with sometimes is so unjustified on certain topics, like it doesn't make any sense for his character to even possibly think about it. His mother's not in the picture, so to speak, which could explain some of that, but are you kidding me? That's never brought up again. It's basically just like a plot device used 4 times throughout the book. The most that she comes up is him saying that people should be kinder to him because she's dead, and good old mum, she taught me that. What's her name? Okay, so for an example of Arthur just being weirdly aggressive towards stuff he wouldn't have any real thought about, he speaks about fame and he says, "What is fame other than the recognition of pointless people by a bunch of other pointless people?" Which doesn't really sound like Arthur. It kind of just sounds like Greg and Greg's experience. He also talks about religion, and sure, if he's the most edgy, nihilistic, atheist kid in the world, he's shouting, shaking his fist at the sky as his voice cracks, yes, maybe that would make sense for his character. But then he starts to talk about the shortcomings of marriage. Like, some of these you could play off. The religion one? Sure. Maybe he watches a bit too much Ben Shapiro. I don't really care. There's ways that you can justify it for the narrative. But marriage? Like, Arthur wouldn't even think about that. He's 17, he probably doesn't care or know anything about marriage. Why would you do this? You know who does know about marriage though? Greg, because he's been in quite a few of them. The only way this could be more transparent that this is a self-insert is if Arthur starts talking about taxes, which now that I think, I actually think he does talk about taxes eventually. Despite it being only 3 pages long, the introduction is littered with insults. I can't really justify it any other way. It just says your life is meaningless and admit you don't matter. Don't even bother trying, superficial lives, humanity is a disease. Even if you're its biggest fan, there are likely hundreds of ways in which I hate you, which is a classic. I hate most everyone I've met. Dreadfully idiotic in response. Balding, delusional, self-loathing freak. God, I can handle criticism, but stupidity is contagious. That one's a favorite. This one's a spicy one, so you better tuck in. You better strap up. You better scoot it down. What if I even began to try and explain what was going on in my mind on a daily basis to the average person? I'd be thrown in a padded cell. On to chapter 1. And by golly, is chapter 1 a doozy. I should probably say now that the chapter names are actually genuinely amazing because they're terrible. Not because they're good, don't worry. This one is called There Is No Point, which is followed by such astounding gems as Need to Breed. I like that one. Crying at My Feet. That one's a good one. Prayed Away. Rejected and Aroused. No Future Here. Oh. Faith in Humanity is just another religion. I've listed about 7 chapters out of 9. They are all amazing. You can also tell immediately when looking at this that I very clearly underestimated how much red ink I would need to complete this book. So, speaking of my notes, for the sake of brevity and respect for the fact you probably have stuff to do today and you can't just watch a 5-hour video of me talk about a book, I'm just going to be relying on my notes from here on out and just winging it. The first chapter is very strange because it does partly exist to introduce you to Arthur's life, but also just kind of devolves into like pretentious, nihilistic, like exposition every once in a while. For no reason. The very first paragraph is, of course, him complaining about living in a suburban abomination. Amazing. The fact that he can't tack posters on the walls, so they have to hang in frames, and that his dad gives him a lift. My heart is aching. And then to prove my point that he just randomly spouts exposition, it starts talking about religion because his dad is religious, which, I mean, kind of makes sense. It then goes back into school started early, blah, 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 I'm going to school. The nature of our daily behavior, what the hell are we talking about? We're now on human nature, and then he just says humans shouldn't speak because therefore they can't be racist, sexist, or homophobic. This is chapter 1, page 2. He then starts talking about his classmates, one of them being Chris, who we never hear of again as far as I'm aware, or maybe I just forgot. Maybe I just shunned that memory away. Who knows? He describes Chris as a word I can't use, but it has to do with... I genuinely can't even describe it. But he does describe Chris in another way, which I can say. I've noticed for some time Chris has an adorable little neck, and this isn't going where you think it's gonna go. I imagine if I wrapped my hands around his throat using only half my strength, I could very easily snap his neck. Dude, he's so cool. He then immediately transitions into talking about a completely different person, that Jessica or something, that he uses to talk about princess syndrome. You can probably imagine what he talks about. He takes way too long to do it though. It's like 2 paragraphs. God, I'm getting bored. Goes back into, just generally hating people. Then over to hating fat people. Then back to hating religion. We're like 4 pages here. I know this is probably confusing, but there's no better way for me to describe this. It's hard for me to keep up, and I'm the one who's written the notes. Like, I'm reading this right off my notes. Oh, and at the very end he says, I'm done ranting. Let's get back to my day. And then there's 1 paragraph describing what he does for the rest of the day. And then the next 3 are talking about his dad's girlfriend that he hates, which is what I like to call ranting. Summarizing chapter 1 is kind of strange because it does very much read like the first day that we get to hear about in a journal of some kid, but like half of it is just like Onision's manifesto. Chapter 2 is where I started getting very frustrated with this book. I started just crossing out entire pages and just, mainly crossing stuff out because I didn't want to read it and it was incredibly pointless. Arthur starts this chapter by saying, it's been weeks since I last wrote in this journal. You could assume this was due to laziness, but I rarely suffer from that degenerative disease. Because he's too perfect. This highlights 2 problems, one with the book and one with the character and how he's written. We'll start with the character because that's the most interesting because it's about Greg. Greg writes Arthur to be this insanely tough, always good, always smart, really handsome alpha male of a human being. If you could even call him that, he may just be God. Arthur is almost never wrong. I can only really think of 2 instances where he's not completely in power and somebody is talking down to him like he's wrong. And even then, it never comes back to bite him. He never really suffers at his own hand because he's always too smart, he's always too fast, he's always too powerful. He can take on like multiple people in a fight at the same time, even when he has no fighting experience. He has no training, he just does it. He's always the most powerful being in the Dragon Ball universe. He's like Goku, but I hate him. The second problem with this very first paragraph is to do with the writing, where he says, it's been weeks since I last wrote in this journal. He continuously uses time and the passage of time, but in many ways, it doesn't really make any sense. Some chapters he'll say, it's been weeks. Other chapters, we can assume weeks have passed, or months even, but he doesn't say. So by the time he joins the military and is in the military, we don't really have a consistent timeline as to how long he's been there. He says months, and he says he's been stationed here for a week, here for 2 weeks, this for a few months, but then time happens in between them and we don't know how long it's been. He also never celebrates a birthday, as far as I can remember, so it's basically just a guess as to how old he is by the end of the book. He could be like 20, it's just never explained, but he keeps using periods of time, and it doesn't make any sense. I'm just confused. This is the chapter where he brings up his mother, and he does actually name her. Her name is Sarah Gale, who he says taught me from day one to never feel sorry for myself. She told me a lot of things before she died. I could not be more grateful to her. And I just... No. She's basically just a plot. She's a Dazed Ex Machina. I just read ahead a little bit, and I just... This one is my... This is my least favorite chapter, I think, actually. There's a lot to go over. First one being that he describes his dad's girlfriend limp legs dangling from the side of a dumpster with like garbage stains and that all over us, basically saying that she's been victim to some horrific crime, or multiple, is less disturbing to see than her kiss his dad. Now, I get the principle behind the matter. It's the dumpster scenario that I don't understand. Those words may annoy you, but don't worry, it gets infinitely worse. Speaking of sports, I've fantasized about a massive weapon going off in the middle of a major sporting event. He then, spends the rest of the paragraph saying, sure, it would be incredibly sad, the horror I know. Meanwhile, the logical standpoint, who cares? You just said you wanted a weapon to go off at a major sporting event. We are well into the whole T-word landscape. This isn't... You can't get away with this. And surprisingly, he only talks about that for that paragraph. He immediately moves on to how useless sports stars are and how they collect millions for kicking a ball around and blah 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 and he's a terrible human being. This honestly psychopathic rambling goes on for about a whole 1.5 pages for no reason, and then immediately transitions into... None of this is why I'm updating my journal. Ironically, despite my murderous imagination, I've managed to find myself in a completely contradictory position. The truth is, I recently started dating a girl at school named Ashley. Ignoring the murderous intent part, which is, tall order, is dating someone a contradictory position to wanting to kill people? I don't think that's correct. Also, what the hell? Arthur, you've done nothing but hate on the entire human species up until this point. Why would you date one of them? The honest answer is, she clearly likes me, and I am available. The first part of that still stands. You didn't disprove that, you've just stated a different point. Luckily though, we get to start talking about romance, intimacy, which is Greg's strong suit. And by strong suit, I mean he writes about it a lot. He's not very good at writing it though. It's very entertaining. He says, Ashley is a good looking girl. Blah blah blah, whatever. I really like her smile too. If that wasn't enough, my body, like most every male body on this planet, demands I be physical with someone. So why not her? Detachment is his specialty. I've crossed out the next 2 paragraphs. See if you can guess why by the first sentence. This is the human condition. I didn't cross out one of the existential paragraphs because it actually includes one of my favorite lines in the entire book. In these things, he's talking about free will and existential stuff. Useless. But I find it quite entertaining because he doesn't know what free will is. He says, if I had free will, I could choose to be gay. I could choose to be happy when I looked in the mirror. I could choose to enjoy life to its fullest. Basically trying to prove that free will doesn't exist. But that's not what free will is. Free will is about making choices, not just overriding what you are at its very core. You can't... Free will doesn't mean you can choose to be gay. You don't choose to be gay. That's not a choice. Being gay isn't a choice. It's a thing that you just are. I'm not gonna read this part. I'll just put it up there or something. I don't want to read it. but I think you should just know it exists. Now this is, by far, the best line in this entire chapter. Like, no questions asked. Ashley's voice is one I could easily enjoy listening to for some time. Her facial proportions are beyond sufficient, and she's generally healthy. Likely more so than me. Ladies, get you a guy that will listen to your voice for some time. Not all the time, because, you know, you gotta devote all his time to, not even most of the time. Just some, like maybe like 20 minutes a day, you know? Get you a man like that. This chapter ends by leading into the third with basically this guy, John, that I don't remember if he comes up again, like after this like whole arc. But essentially John violates Ashley's space or whatever, or it's like sexually charged, and Arthur's like, I'm gonna kill him, he's giving me an excuse to boot him up. He's calling him like a primate, essentially. He's saying he's primitive. You know, he's a perverted teenage boy that only thinks about sex, which goes on for most of this page and most of the second one. What's the action? He placed his hand on Ashley's hips so that they could talk. That very much can be, you know, sexual and invading someone's space, but maybe if you're gonna talk about it for like more than a page, describe it with more malicious intent. Because I ain't really feeling that from he placed his hands on her hip, or a hand on her hip. That's not really enough to justify what happens next. The first paragraph of Crying at My Feet, also known as Chapter 3, also known as Electric Boogaloo number 2, it says like, oh, yeah, I'm gonna fight him. I know it's a bad decision, but to say I really had a fair choice in the matter is a joke. But the only joke here is you, because of course he had a choice. Do you think... Like, people don't just go out and, like, punch people for doing stuff. There's like a peaceful option. This part will be quite long, but it'll basically be the only part of the chapter I actually talk about, because this is where we get to the fight scene. I want it to be really dynamic, but I don't want to move the pages and lose my spot. He comes up, he's wearing a trench coat or something. I actually don't really remember. Yeah, no, he's wearing a trench coat, a black trench coat. I think he's wearing face paint as well, or maybe not at this point. He says, John, are you ready to hurt? Yeah, you ready to hurt? And he's like JoJo, his stand comes out and like beats him up. That doesn't happen, but it would be way more interesting if it did. John no doubt felt somewhat uncomfortable seeing these words come from the lips of someone who looked like me, mainly a massive nerd. That wasn't true. I intentionally wore a trench coat and all black that day, because he's so cool, to appear much larger than I was. Okay, I've inserted some jokes into the... This isn't a joke. This one is not a joke. This was a strategy I learned from butterflies. Butterflies, better known as king of the jungle. Ferocious beasts they are. You can kind of see hints of it before in the other chapters, but this is the first one where you can genuinely see that Greg is trying to write Arthur, or his self-insert, to be this insanely cool alpha with lines such as, John tried to act like everything was cool. You know, his jock friends are standing behind him. After taking a brief look into their eyes, it was obvious both of them thought their lives could be in danger, mainly because they were gonna end themselves to avoid the cringe. John swore at me, calling me the popular emasculating word goth kids are normally subjected to. This is needlessly wordy, pretentious, and I'm not even actually sure what word he meant to say. Arthur immediately punches him in the throat, then proceeds to break the flow of the fight by spending the next paragraph talking about the possible damage after punching someone to the neck could cause, and health risk and workplace safety. I just like kind of zoned out at this point. The blow I delivered to his throat shocked John's jock friend. Looks like he wanted to help John, but I screamed, threatening to murder him, and he backed off. I think I specifically said, I'll stab you in the jugular and watch you bleed, meathead. Which is extremely... He even says it's a mouthful, the line after. And also, it's really cringy, and you don't... Why would you say that? Just say I'll kill you. It's worked time and time again, alright? It's a classic, it'll work. This is where the hero complex of the whole thing starts to come in. You know, I stood confidently as I watched him get back up because, you know, sucker punched him. John returned to his feet, and I let him hit me a few more times. I knew there was a good chance I would be expelled if I didn't make the fight look at least somewhat even, which doesn't make any sense. Once I was bored of my face being tenderized like the meat of a freshly slaughtered animal, I decided to break his arm. There's 4 instances in that paragraph, as you may have heard by me essentially screaming them at you, where he states that he's like always in control. There's never a point in this fight where, despite being... I think he's shorter than him, actually. I think he says he's shorter than John. And probably weaker because John's a jock, where he's never, not in control. He's always in control of the fight, even though John would realistically turn him into a, trash cube. He then goes around saying, quite gracefully, I did this maneuver and stepped here and then got his arm in the position and then twisted and then slammed my boot down. And people don't fight like that. I don't know if Greg's actually been in a fight before. That ain't it. He says that he knows this because his mom didn't just teach him philosophical lessons, but also how to defend myself and destroy my enemies. But I thought she was dead for a long time. What the hell happened? This is a reoccurring thing as well. Every time he finishes a fight, or he does something that's really alpha or badass, somebody comes in that wasn't there before and is really spooked and scared by the big, tough, scary man, which wouldn't happen. In this case, it's the principal, I'm pretty sure, or the vice principal, or whatever the hell, who looks completely freaked out because, he was a mess and he's covered in blood or whatever. A principal would not be freaked out by a kid being bloodied after a fight. They would be like, what the hell are you doing? And just go back and do paperwork. They've got bigger issues to deal with. You ain't the toughest person they've seen, alright? This is a pretty good part. This is where we start getting, legal and stuff. The loss of my tooth, in addition to the cuts and bruises on my face, were enough to convince them that the damages were mutual. Especially considering it only took 2 strikes for me to defeat John, like he's some kind of boss, while he had struck me around 7 times. Also a recurring theme, they always hit him more than he hits them, but he's just so super tough that he never gets knocked out. Despite me starting the fight, the action of breaking his arm was self-defense. I made it clear to the police that I was losing my grip on him, and had I not done what I did, he would surely do to my face even more damage than he had already done. The argument was one of the most important aspects of justifying self-defense, which isn't how that works. It's just so unbelievable. This is the first out of 2 times that I can remember the police show up, and both times the police do not do their jobs. They have no clue what they're doing. This is just wrong. 100% wrong. Breaking his arm is escalating it, and you can't do that. It's the same kind of principle behind somebody coming at you with a baseball bat and you not being allowed to immediately shoot them. You're escalating the fight a little bit. You're not really supposed to do that. There is 100%, there would be some kind of legal ramification. He would be sued, there would be some kind of claim against him. He wouldn't just get away scot-free. He does get some kind of punishment, but it's just being suspended from school, which is completely separate. He was probably going to be suspended anyway, because he's a terrible student. He starts the next chapter by being suspended, saying, "It's been weeks since I went to school. Fortunately for me, my girlfriend has visited me at home a few times since. Not really relevant. Ashley and I have made out a number of times. If anything, what I did to John brought us closer together in the long run." Which is... every single time anything intimate happens with someone he's dating, it's always in the first or second paragraph of a chapter. It's basically just yo, basically, things are pretty good in my life. Also, I'm macking my girlfriend's face. We're going at it. We're slamming cheeks. I don't really... This chapter also includes the line, "I am an alpha." Unironically, that's Oh, and I will be to the day I die. So this isn't like some video essay weird conspiracy about how this is all about him being he says it. He says he's an alpha. I don't even need to bring this up close because you can see it. That entire page is just talking about religion. I do not care. I have actually written down a note here. It's pretty long about how Arthur and Ashley should have broken up after that. Like, he was wrong to do that. That was immature. It was ignorant. It was intolerant. Should have done that. Should have gone the peaceful option. Should have done something else. Whatever. So Arthur and Ashley should break up here. My book. And that should be a lesson for him. That would be... It's not good character development, but it would be better. Like, there would be some kind of growth there. But it doesn't, and he learns nothing from this, and continues to use violence for the rest of the book, and it really sucks. So that was chapter 4. Now we get on to Rejected and Aroused, which is my favorite chapter name, but not really that great of a chapter. He comes to school after being suspended wearing face paint, which I believe is that part, like that's what that picture is. He's like a skeleton. I'm not sure if that's a skeleton, but sure, whatever. He's got the trench coat on. This silver tooth he has that you got replaced by the one that John... I didn't know that kind of... It makes him look like a pirate now, like a weird skeletal pirate. Goes to school, gets called into the principal's office, gets told off, says, "You don't know me," and he's like, "I know you. I know who you are." And then he's like, "No, you don't. My mom died." And then the principal just goes, "Yeah, anyway, what's with the face paint?" And he gets really sad about the principal not bowing down and being like, "Oh my god, I'm so sorry you lost your mom." When, a bunch of people lose parents at multiple stages of their life and they don't really use it to, like, try and guilt trip people. Goes to the bathroom and, like, cries or something about that, about not being in control. I'm used to being the strongest one in every room. Someone tries to befriend him. I actually don't know who it is. The guy who he wanted to... That guy. Comes in and says, "I'm not your enemy, dude." And then he ignores him and he says, "Man, we're on the same side." And then Arthur just says, "No, you're not," and then leaves. Like, he's just objectively a jerk. Blah, blah, blah. Ashley is sitting with her friends. He's joining them. And then, just like, he's really rude. Maybe because he's sad. Maybe not. Maybe he's just always like this. Says, "Ashley, can we ditch your loser idiot friends?" She doesn't. She just sits there because it's like, what the hell are you doing? We're supposed to be dating. You're supposed to be kind of nice to my friends or something. Then, acting like the entitled toddler he is, he storms off and he's like, "Woohoo." And then she apologizes to him. This is his view on relationships and women. This is eerily similar to something that's happened in Greg's life, wouldn't you say? He talks about, I was fixing the idea that she only liked me for one thing, and that an alpha male pulling away from the pack of cackling turkeys would only make her feel weak, like he was emasculating her and not just being a dick. Arthur fucks up and gets rewarded. The novel. It's the entire chapter. Arthur messes up so bad, doesn't get punished, doesn't learn anything, and gets rewarded. Why do I try? By the way, I'm not sure if you can tell, that's how far we're through the book right now. We'll start getting quicker. First chapter, again, Ashley and I have been together quite a while now. Pointless, I don't know how much time that's been. I didn't write about the first time we slept together, as I just haven't felt compelled to update my journal. Oh man. It happened a few weeks ago, and blah 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 blah. I don't care. Basically got laid. I don't know why Greg cares so much about telling us that Arthur's been laid. Man, I crossed out like this entire chapter and I didn't read this. I'll put this up somewhere. Oh my god. So bad. It's just him getting laid and then also saying my views and feelings are put into question, but they're actually not, because he never changes really throughout the entire book. The only real thing that he relates to relationships is loyalty. Chapter 7, Blood Means Nothing. This is where stuff starts to get quite incredibly unbelievable. He's going on like some kind of family visit with his dad and his dad's girlfriend, and whatever. his dad tells him to turn down the music, he ignores him, and he's kind of being distant to his dad, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And what's your problem, kid? Your girlfriend sucks. She's a fat slop. He uses meaner words. I'm just not going to say them. And then his dad just immediately lunges at him and starts choking him. I would, but, like, why would his dad? His dad's never been shown as violent before. And then all of a sudden he just starts choking the shit out of his kid. He starts kicking his dad in the face multiple times, like breaking his nose or whatever. He's like kicking his chest and his neck. He's trying to get him off him. No, like, I'm going to die here. He's choking me. Oh my god. Body hits the dash or whatever. He's like, oh, and then he runs. He sprints out. He hasn't got a shoe. He's running for his life. It's really serious. And you know, what's going on? Like, oh my god, this is starting to get really intense. Then the police come. I think he's crying at this point. You know, like he's like covered in blood, right? He's on the sidewalk, no shoe, ligature marks at this point probably because it's been quite a while. And the police come up to him and he says, he's hit me. My dad just tried to choke me, tried to kill me. I'm running away from him. Can you help me? And then the police arrest me. Do you know how unbelievable that is? The officers ignored me. How could they pay attention to anything I had to say? Choke marks don't show up as easily as someone's boot in your face. Yes, but also, choke marks still show up, and they would probably believe a kid. I could do that right now. I could go up to a police officer and just say my parents hit me, and they would drop everything. Without blood on my shirt. Do you know how easy that would be? This paragraph summarizes the whole thing. It's kind of hard to read because I've crossed it out multiple times. The judge let me walk because I guess my father didn't press charges. I mentioned my father attacked me first to multiple people, but no one really cared. They only cared what he had to say. I was just the property of my father to them. Legal slaves. That's all the government treats kids like. And you wonder why I hate you people. Where the hell are you? In what universe would nobody listen to a kid who's saying he's getting attacked by his dad? So unlikely. Also, legal slaves, are you kidding me? Chapter 8, no future here. Not really an interesting chapter. The only really funny thing is saying, sad thing I've slept with my girlfriend more times in the last month than he has with his girlfriend ever. Pretty sure my orgasms bring me more joy than his religion ever brought him as well. Kind of strange. Not kind of, that's incredibly strange. This is the part where he introduces that he wants to go into the military, which doesn't make any sense, because he hasn't shown any ambitions towards anything other than like slamming his body against his girlfriend's a lot. So writing him to want to go into the military doesn't make any sense, because the military requires quite a lot of, commitment, which he doesn't have. He refuses to eat a meal that his father, whatever the hell, he's come down for dinner, he's like, I don't want to eat. His dad screams, call the cops. The cops come, and his dad doesn't lie here. He just says, my son refused to eat food, the dinner. He refused to eat dinner. And the police turns to him and just goes, what's your problem, kid? As if they wouldn't be like, what? I don't... Man, people are getting shot. Arthur says, yeah, surely you're not going to waste your time with this. And the officer just says, we're going to straighten this kid's attitude out. Do we need to take you in? And I was genuinely expecting, because it turns the page over to this, I was genuinely expecting to just read, and then they beat me. So really this is like just another instance of him victimizing himself for literally no reason whatsoever. Also, he misspells appetite. Chapter 9. Whatever, I don't really care anymore. This is the chapter in which the GED or whatever the American thing comes back, and he's military time, blah, 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 talk about jobs and existential crisis. He goes to military training, meets his drill sergeant who's like a terrible person or a monster or whatever, and says, if we had the energy or privacy to gratify ourselves, which you can imagine what that means, we would be doing it to her or whatever it is. Blah, blah, blah. I skipped most of this chapter. Oh wow, this was apparently very terrible. I knew this would take some time, but this has taken way longer than I thought it would. And the battery's running out on this microphone, so I actually have to... I'll be back in like 2 seconds, which will be like a day for me. Yeah, so as it turns out, I actually really shouldn't have done that under my current circumstances. Like, there was too much of a workload, and it was very strenuous, and it had a noticeable negative impact on my well-being. But I am very committed to, not to finishing this per se, but to making sure I never have to think about it again. I couldn't shoot it continuously because the first shoot was like 2.5 hours long and I needed to do things, so I thought I'll cut up the clips, I'll manage the footage before I start the second shoot. Foolishly, because I wanted this video to be maximum 40 minutes long, and it was over 40 minutes long already. Like, this thing is cursed. So from now on, I'm being super brief about this. Let's make this mistake a reality. Teamwork makes the dream work. Your parents don't love you. This is just gonna be perfect, isn't it? Whatever his current girlfriend's name is acts disinterested in him like a week after he enters the military, which is extremely justified, but also comes out of nowhere because, again, he sucks at writing, so what's the point? He also says he doesn't mind because if the roles were reversed, he knows that he'll be doing the exact same thing and would already have a girlfriend within weeks, because I cannot stress this enough. He is the perfect human being and all women must flock to him without further hesitation. Just get on that. I'm not gonna say it. Arthur then, somehow in his military life, meets a new friend. Is it a male friend? Don't be stupid, her name is Corey. And together, there's nothing they can't do, with both of their skills combined, and the content of their character being equally as important. They have to go through a mandatory suicide prevention course, which includes a live reenactment of whatever, and they have to solve it with only their kind words. And they are, of course, one of the few groups that actually succeeds and gets them like a perfect grade or whatever, because when I think of Arthur, the first words that come to my head is empathy, wholesomeness, maybe a robot. Kind words. Definitely not a Harvard University learning AI designed to find the breaking point, at which point, like, a human will just murder somebody else because they find them so annoying. It's... And kindness. Soon afterwards, Arthur calls out his training instructor for insulting the troops during a training exercise which violates the rules of the acronym insert here, and turns out Arthur's actually wrong in this situation. But don't worry, you Arthur lovers, all 2.5 of you, because they pull the most cop-out excuse that I could have possibly thought of just to make sure that Arthur actually isn't wrong. Arthur quotes an excerpt from this acronym, but it turns out he was only given an excerpt, and the full statement makes it that so that he's actually wrong in this situation, which is so dumb, because even when Arthur is wrong, he's not even wrong, because you couldn't have known that. He was given the wrong answer. I want to drop this book, but it's got the microphone on it, and I paid so much for this thing. He explains that him and girl number 2 haven't fallen into the classic guy-girl relationship, because there's no romantic relationship between them, but he does gratify himself to her all the time, so, I mean, yeah, technically that's not every guy-girl relationship. Congratulations, you fucking weirdo. Here's a $15 gift card to Applebee's. Choke on it. He likes to remark that Corey enjoys making fun of uber tough airmen that try to be super manly, which doesn't include Arthur because he's a nice guy, trademarked, except that he's also super tough, which means he exists on like both ends of the spectrum radically without ever stepping foot closer to the middle, which just, it's like, that's like saying gravity doesn't exist. It shouldn't happen. It's also this part where he reveals that he wants to volunteer for every possible placement because he doesn't like the idea of innocent people getting hurt and him not doing anything about it. But he just said, not 4 pages ago, that he hates basically everyone. Help me. I'm so confused. Okay, this book's actually getting like super annoying to hold, so I'm just gonna put this on my actual body now, like for real. One of those volunteering applications goes through and he ends up saying that he's going to South Korea or the other, one of the Koreas. He says this to Corey while they're sitting watching a movie on their bed, and she's like, oh, that's a shame. And he goes to kiss her, but she says that they shouldn't, but also says, I love you, and that is a direct quote. And he says it back because it turns out she's actually gay, but we don't know that yet. And even when we know that, it makes this extremely confusing. Regardless, help me, Life Alert, help! Ashley somehow comes back into his life, you know, the first girl from high school, and calls him and is really angry because he doesn't know that her brother is dead because he was shot in a school shooting. Oh, no! That's not good at all. He flies back home being the good man he is, and as soon as he arrives, she comes onto him pretty heavily. And, you know, being the stoic man he is, he contemplates the morality of giving into this kind of lust and even letting her do this because, I'm just kidding, it's for like half a paragraph. He basically doesn't even think about it. He just says, oh, well, this is what she wants, so it's her fault. I'll let her have my body. She's like, I'm the only reason she hasn't shot herself yet. He actually says that. Oh. Push-ups are basically our way of simulating slow, impactful punching is an excerpt from a part of a book that basically doesn't even matter. It's just where he's being an alpha male. It's not important, it's not relevant, but, you know, come on. You just had to hear that. He also starts dating another person. That's not a surprise. Her name is Rachel, but he basically just refers to her as Booty because, as he puts it, goddamn, or whatever the hell. And I don't want to say that that's, you know, kind of sexist or kind of misogynistic, but it also is, so there's not really an argument. And as it turns out, she is the first person that Arthur has dated that isn't the same race as him or the same skin color, which is something he specifically points out and then says, but, and then a positive, which implies that the first part about her being a different race is a negative. And I think you're supposed to infer that it's referring to that there's a lack of experience in that department, but also, are you fucking kidding me? She has like more melanin in her skin. She doesn't have fangs. What the fuck? We also meet a nice man named Airman Austin, who is a homophobic piece of trash and possibly racist. We don't really know. It's never really implied, but knowing Greg, that's exactly what he is. He's basically just a super bad villain, and he says he's gonna bang Rachel, you know, in front of Arthur and telling him that as if to gloat. And you know that scene from The Perks of Being a Wallflower where Charlie blacks out, and it's supposed to be this impactful moment that shows the start of the downward spiral of mental health that we see, and also shows that we can't really trust him because he is somewhat of a loose cannon. We're not really supposed to like him. This is a flaw that he has. It is not a sexy flaw. It is genuinely harmful to his life. Imagine that, but none of the impact. And it's just like he blacks out and literally just baboons himself and just takes his eyeball out. He rips a man's eye out, and he's our hero in this story. So yeah, he defends his fair maiden's honor because, of course, she couldn't do it herself, and just ooga booga, baboon jumps onto his face and rips his eye out. So can you guess who's going to be the only and main transparent two-dimensional villain for the last, 4 chapters? It's not very long. Corey arrives at their new base, and the three of them super hit it off, and they're all happy, they're having a good time, they're eating food, they mentioned meat. Oh no, Arthur's gone into his I hate dad rage mode, and he just U-turns and just goes straight back into fuck you dad, you don't know me kind of territory. Corey and Rachel start getting it on because Rachel is bi, but also still dating Arthur. And as Arthur puts it, there's no romantic physical relation between him and Corey, because as he puts it, that's just how most gay people work. But I would argue that's how all gay people work, because that's the definition of being gay. Em and Austin and the boys try to fuck with Corey's vibes or something because she's gay, and once again, in the second time in maybe 5 seconds, he defends his fair ladies despite both of them being in the military and having military training and theoretically being able to, at the very least, help him in a fight. But as you can see here on this map, this area is under construction, with this part of the land being reserved for Greg's fucking alpha male ego that he feels the need to implant on every single character that he has. Bada bing, bada boom, everything goes wrong. Finally, please punish Arthur. Just kidding, it's not Arthur that gets punished. Austin and the fellas just lie and say that Corey told them that she was gay, so she's gonna get kicked out in a few weeks. And then they just wait for a bit, and for no reason decide to do the no-no thing with Rachel, ad-friendly. I actually cannot even remotely say the word, but it's the one where you do, and it's worse than murder. We'll say that, it's worse than murder. To which Arthur proclaims, I could never let this happen to my girls. And this is, like, it's not like a bad thing, but it just sounds like he's talking about his children. That's how dads refer to their daughters. Anyway, he fights off, like, some of them, maybe most of them. I actually can't remember. I think he kills a few people. But then the best part of the book happens, and he dies. He actually gets killed, but the bad thing is he's like a martyr now because he was such a hero. But he's dead. Like, actually, he dies. I'm so excited. The epilogue's written by Corey and Rachel or something. I don't care. I didn't read it. Arthur was dead. I'm done. I'm finally released from this prison. There's also a bunch of other parts of the book that aren't really relevant to, like, any kind of point I was making about him being an alpha male or just terrible writing or the time thing. But I can't really show them in any sort of way. Unless... Okay, but like, for real, thank you for watching. If you've seen this all the way to the end, that's a substantial amount of your day gone. I just touched the microphone, sorry about that. May have merch coming soon, I actually have no clue. But stick around and find out. Hopefully I won't make another one of these videos that's like 2 hours long, and I'll be able to release it far sooner. Thank you again for watching. I really, really hope that you enjoyed it. And thanks for supporting me. Alright. Bye.